Well, good morning, Southern Oregon, and welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here at John L. Scott Real Estate in beautiful Southern Oregon. I'm your host of the Real Estate Show. And before we get on with the show, let's take a quick minute and talk about what happened in our local market this week. So long term, we're thinking we're going to have more listings and the prices will stabilize. The buyers will have more choices. It'll be a more normal market, at least normal by what we've had the last couple of years. Now, with that said, some weeks are a little lower in inventory than others. Things are going in fits and starts. But overall, we still are predicting that we're going to have a more stabilizing market. Additionally, we do have the investors kind of jumping in. And this would be because they're trying to hedge inflation. So if we had not had this extreme inflation, those folks might not be jumping in right now. But you combine that with the not threat of rising interest rates. They did go up and they're due to go up a couple more times this year. So we're still experiencing a little bit of shortage on the inventory side. But again, it's week by week in fits and starts. So one of the things we want to recommend is if you're selling, you really got to pay attention to where the market is. If we're in the process of transitioning to a more normal market, you don't want to go back to last summer's prices because that might not be appropriate for your home, your neighborhood, your area right now. So we do see some properties coming on the market this week and they were spot on, clean, ready to rock and roll. They'd had their inspection. They were easy to show. And they were priced right. And we do still get multiple offers. We just don't have them happen very often like they used to. Now, we also saw several properties come on the market this week, and they were priced way too high. And it really looked like they were trying to go back and capture something from the summer. So just a note to sellers to be careful because, it's not the same market it was. So let's get on with our interview today. We've got Ryan Johnson. He's a newer agent at John L. Scott. He's got a great story. He's here through Paradise. He's a Paradise fire survivor, and he's got a lot to bring to the table for real property and investment. So we're super happy to have Ryan Johnson on the show today. He's a broker at John L. Scott in the Medford office. And he's got some great tips and some great information to pass on to all of us. So one of our rising stars at John L. Scott, we're super happy to have Ryan on the show today. We're going to take a quick break, say thank you to our sponsors, and we'll be right back. So don't touch that dial. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. I'm Alice Lema, broker John L. Scott here in beautiful Southern Oregon. And today we're so excited to be interviewing Ryan Johnson of John L. Scott. Ryan is one of our newer superstars, and he's got a fabulous story to tell. So thank you for being on the show today, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. It's good to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Well, I just think, when we have new agents and they're doing well and they have a great story, we just want to, that's part of what the radio show is for. And then also just to talk about how real estate has been in your life. So why don't you take a minute, introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your background?
Yeah, there's a lot of places to start here. I'll go through some career history. I've done all kinds of fun and wacky jobs, from outdoor educator and science and math teacher to I sold Christmas trees in Harlem years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so all kinds of stuff. I've worked as a farmer and had some herds of goats. I grew up on a small cattle ranch in Northern California and moved around there a lot. And in the process, I saw my dad would buy a couple of properties, and he held them for a long time as rentals. And I saw how, 10 years later, when he sold them, that paid off for him. And I just kind of got to see just a taste of how it works. I didn't go in depth or anything. But that was just helpful in igniting my curiosity around real estate. And I started as an agent about 1.5 years ago. I was a science and math teacher. I moved to Oregon after my town burned down. I lived in Paradise, California. I'm sure we'll unpack some of this too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I feel for all the people who didn't come out on top. There's a lot of people who are still struggling.
Yeah.
And, that continues every day for a lot of people. And I'm fortunate that in some ways that tragedy kind of propelled us and got us into Oregon here, which has been good to us. So once I came up here, I was stay-at-home dad for a year with my oldest. He was about 2 at the time. So we got to hike every day and hunt mushrooms and do all kinds of fun stuff outside. And I got a job in Grants Pass here where I live as a math teacher, and I was all excited. And then COVID hit, and the funding for my position dried up, so I had to come up with some sort of plan B.
Really?
Yeah,
Teachers were essential service people.
Well, here's the thing: there was a grant from the state. I guess it was like a new tax on larger businesses in the state. And it was going to provide money for more teachers. So I got hired on as a new teacher, and then they shifted that money before the school year started to take care of whatever COVID needs there were, or whatever changes were caused. So that dried up the money for my position before it started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was, is another example of lemons. And I like to think I try and turn them into lemonade when I can. And I'm really thankful in hindsight that I thought of the opportunity, or had the opportunity to work in real estate, because it's just been so awesome. It's been so good for me and for my family. And we have a lot of opportunities now as a result.
Well, and I didn't realize you came from a real estate family.
I don't know if I would go as far to label it a real estate family, but there was a couple of properties that happened in there. And my dad built the house that I grew up in. On top of this hill on 10 acres. And there was the old house from the 1800s at the bottom of the hill I lived in when I was little. And, when he sold it, I got to hear, oh, we bought it at this. And yes, we built a house, but the difference in price was a game changer. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. Is that something I could pull off? I don't see why not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it made an impression. It's interesting because a lot of younger people go through that same life experience, and they do not clue in to the investment opportunity, to the stability and wealth building opportunity of real estate. So I'm sitting here kind of smiling that, you're a math teacher, so you must have done the numbers when you were like,
yeah,
and went, oh,
yeah. I wasn't even trying to be a math teacher. I have a science credential, and I worked at this tiny little rural school in the middle of nowhere. And they said, well, you're actually the science department and the math department.
Well, that's what they do to teachers, right?
Yeah. So anyway, then the more I taught the math, the more I realized, this is actually really fun. And there's few things in the world that are so concrete. I find I can name on one hand the things I can think of that are black and white, and math is just one of those things.
And real estate is not.
And real estate is not in any way, but I really appreciate that, the math challenges, because I can come up with the right answer, and that's fun to do.
Yeah.
And in the investing world, which I'm trying to dip my toe in these days, that has been, I use those math skills on such a regular basis when just, I set goals for myself of like, let's crunch a number on on X number of properties every day, usually like 1 or 2. I just pick a couple houses I find on the MLS and say, what kind of numbers would you get in returns for a short-term rental? Or what could I expect if I own this place and I was renting it? What would be the difference between my mortgage and the rent you could expect? And it's not that I can buy that many properties, but it's a really good exercise. And when I work with investors, it's good to have that experience and to be fresh on those calculations, because I can do a lot of them, or estimates in my head, because I've done it 1,000 times now,
Well, and that's what it takes. You have to hone your craft, and real estate agents have to do it. Not enough agents do spend the time, especially in the investor world. So good for you. And speaking of investor world, you are an investor. Is that correct?
Recently. So yeah, we just closed on our first short-term rental property.
Oh, congratulations.
Vacation rental. Yeah. Thank you. It's been kind of my dream for a long time to have the idyllic little cabin in the woods. That's what I really wanted. And there's a little community near us called Rocky Point. And I set my
Oh yeah, I love Rocky Point.
It's so good. It's like this hidden gem. No one knows.
It is.
The blue collar lake of the woods.
Yeah. And it's near the zip line.
Yeah. Right by the zip line. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I said, what do I have to do? I started reading tons of books on business and real estate. I'm sure you're familiar with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That one comes up.
Yeah.
And, I thought I want to buy an asset. I'm not rich, but this is an area that, you don't, the cost of housing over there is relatively inexpensive once you get over to the Lema side. And it feels achievable. Maybe I could do it. So I wrote a letter to like every homeowner in Rocky Point and just sent them another letter and sent them another letter. And I got a handful of calls and I hung out with some really awesome people on the lake. I couldn't find a place that I could afford or that would work for me. And then the more I learned, the more I realized, what about partnering? That's something that is possible. And I wound up
good.
partnering with a longtime friends of mine. And so it's two couples, me and my wife and two of my friends. And so we went in together and we had a lot more ability to land something that would work. And I think we came with a really awesome solution. We just went live last week and had our first guest this.
And did you get reviewed? Did you get your review?
It took so much work to get it off the ground and to get it all furnished and get the hot tub in and yada yada yada. It was a ton of work, and I think there's gonna be a ton of rewards for that. So we'll have.
So how did your first guest like it?
We haven't gotten a review yet, so we're waiting. Hopefully it's that 5 stars.
Yeah, well, good for you. I mean, being an investor is something a lot of people think about and dream about, but to actually take the concrete steps takes, courage. It takes some ingenuity, and it takes a little bit of money.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't want to say anyone can go out and do it right away because it takes some know-how and it takes some funds. But I definitely set concrete goals. I knew what I wanted. And the more I just watch YouTube videos, there's some people I really like, and I just watch all of their videos and learn everything, even if they didn't apply to me. I listened to Bigger Pockets podcast. I don't know if you're familiar. They're one of my favorites. So anytime I'm driving to, show a house or go to an inspection or whatever, I just have Bigger Pockets on and I'm just listening. I'm a sponge for knowledge. So I'm just hearing everyone's questions and testimonials and stories and trying to soak it all up. And so I kind of picked a strategy that I wanted to do, and I set a goal, and it didn't pan out the way I originally planned, but I learned so much in the meantime that I think I came up with better solutions in the end.
Yeah, well, good for you. Good for you. And then how did you find John L. Scott?
I guess that's a good story too. Cut me off if I'm talking too much.
No, this is about you and real estate and the market and.
Yeah. Well, the short version, I guess, or the medium length version of the story is I decided I was going to do real estate. I put my mind to it and I jammed through that 250 hours of schooling. I think it was. And I got my license, passed my test, and I called everyone I could think of who had ever been involved in real estate, anyone who's ever an agent. I have a cousin in Southern California, Huntington Beach, who's been an agent forever. And I have, random people who are distant relatives who I haven't talked to in decades. And I got their phone number. I called them and I said, what's the deal? What do I need to succeed? How do I do this? Do you think I can do it?
Wow, you did homework.
Yeah, I went heavy on the homework and research, and I think it really panned out. And one of the people I called, a friend of mine, had just bought a house in Phoenix, Oregon here. And she said, oh, I loved my agent. I found her online. She's with John L. Scott, and you should give her a call and just see what she says. So I called her, and Jessie Veronelli. And I called her and I said, hey, can you give me tips? What do I need to know? And she was great. She laid out like, these are the programs you're going to use for your bookkeeping. Here's how you keep track of your mileage.
Oh, that was kind.
Yeah, you need all these things. And one of the biggest things, she said, you need you need Jim Remley with eReal Estate Coach, wherever you land, whatever brokerage you pick. And so I got in touch with Jim, and the first thing you do is you have a Zoom interview. And before I did, I went and I created a little graph of all of the brokerages that I was considering in the area, and I rated them on their internet ratings as far as Google ads or Google business goes, their Yelp ads, and then their internet presence in general, and just how often they came up in my searches, and so I kind of charted them in which order I'd want to work. And John L. Scott, I didn't know anything about these places, but John L. Scott kept coming up to the top.
Well, they're super digital.
I mean, that's true. And it wasn't
Yeah.
just digital ratings. I mean, I looked at a lot of different aspects, and it's been a couple of years, so I don't quite remember what they all were, but I had all these categories laid out and a rating for everything. So Jim interviewed me and he said, I'd love to teach you as your real estate coach, but I can't because you don't work for our office. And if you're a local agent, we have a non-compete clause, non-competition clause. So he said, I'm sorry, we can't make it happen. Then we just chatted for a little bit. And I said, hey, look, I got this chart and it just keeps coming back. Tell me, John, Scott's number one. So you tell me what I got to do. And he said, you know what? I'll give you a hard maybe. And so he sent me over to our office manager, Tiffany, and we had a super fun little meeting, and I was a shoe-in. And so I feel like I really scored on that one because I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I had a couple other interviews that were great too, but I'm sure happy that I landed John L. Scott.
Well, and we're so glad you're here. And
Yeah,
appreciate you being on the show today. We're going to have to take a quick break with our sponsors. We're speaking with Ryan Johnson, one of our newer agents who's just killing it out there in real estate land here at John L. Scott. So we'll be back in a few minutes. We've got messages from John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, Guy Giles, Mutual of Omaha Mortgage, and our local Rogue Valley Association Realtors. Do not touch that dial. Well, hi, folks. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema, your host here at the Real Estate Show in Southern Oregon. I'm a broker with John L. Scott Real Estate. And we have a very exciting conversation today with Ryan Johnson, who's also with John L. Scott, and he's one of our newer agents. He's also a Paradise Fire survivor, a recent investor, and he is a former teacher. That's quite a pedigree.
Yep. That's
so,
a
with your math background and also as an investor, let's talk a little bit about the market because it's very weird out there right now.
Yeah.
We have the housing shortage. We've had a shortage of listings for a long time, but that seems to be changing. We seem to have more people putting their homes on the market. What's it like in your business? What are you experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, the shortage of housing has been definitely problematic. I've been working primarily with buyers. So, it's the most challenging angle to be in right now is how do I find someone a home, especially a first-time home buyer. It can be really hard to get your foot in the door with higher prices. And now the interest rates are rising. It's going to make it even tougher. So, I'm a big believer in listening to experts, and across the board, it sounds like that the expectations are that interest rates are going to continue rising, and they've been rising more steeply than the predictions. That
was kind of surprising, huh?
I mean, it's taken some pretty big jumps. So, I'm just trying to educate people, and that's my background too, is education as a science and math teacher. So, I try not to be preachy, but as much information as I can provide to just frame in, hey, this is how things are. This is what it normally looks like when those are the conditions, and this is how we succeed. And, even though it's a challenging position to be a buyer's agent, not that I'm strictly a buyer's agent, but when I'm working in that position, I've been pretty successful with landing offers. And that feels good, to be able to have a winning strategy that's not just bidding way high over. And, one thing I was taught was when you're about to submit an offer, you always call the listing agent and you say, hey, is there anything that's other than the bottom line, anything that's non-monetary, that's of value that can make my offer look better? And oftentimes you get these great little gems. I read a negotiation book a while ago called Never Split the Difference by Chris.
Oh, that's a great book.
Yeah, it's fun. And, he would call it like the black swan moment. And maybe that's a dramatic way to put this specific thing, but it can be really helpful to say, hey, you know what, or when you hear my sellers just really need to sell the place outside of this time window. They're going to be on vacation for these 2 weeks. So if we can just work around these dates. And if I'm the only agent who asks that and help them succeed in their goals, then it helps my clients succeed in our goals too.
Yeah, so it's really interesting how human real estate is. And I remember during the height of the frenzy during the shutdown, when everybody was buying everything, I had buyers that were young and they ended up winning over 7 other people because they were willing to clean the yard.
Like before closing?
No, just like the buyers, it was a rural property. They had been there for 2 generations, and it was like an old farm-ish kind of place. And it was that same thing. It's like asking what else you can do. And they won the bid because they were willing to let the seller leave all the 2 generations of stuff, and they cleaned it out later. It was really surprising how human, and it didn't really
It's so
cost them
true.
anything.
Man, of all the skills my various careers have taught me that have prepared me for real estate, I worked in mental health for a while, and that's where I met my wife. She's a therapist. She wasn't my therapist, for the record. No,
We weren't gonna ask.
I worked at a series of group homes, and I had like a great recreation coordinating job. So I got to do super fun stuff, rafting and backpacking. But did I just lose track? Where was I going with this? The skills I got from working in mental health. There's these 2 things that are so common when you're working in mental health, especially, and just learning empathy is reflect and validate. Whenever someone's talking to you and they're being heartfelt, you can help that person feel heard, and you can empathize with them if you just reflect what they say, and you say something along the line, something validating along the lines of, I totally understand how that could happen or why you'd feel that way. And just doing that and taking time to hear people's feelings and thoughts about something is so powerful in making connections and in making deals and having other people feel heard. I think it's a skill we should all be better at.
Yeah. And I think the more successful agents have that ability because it's so emotional. And then you have the kind of buying and selling climate we deal with right now, and then the world events, and it's very scary and stressful now. This week in particular, I think we have a lot of families from overseas, and now it's affecting their real estate decisions, or some of them are actually moving because of what's going on overseas. And that ability to empathize and help them get some clarity is super, super important.
It's a foundational life skill. I just think everyone should, including myself, we should all just be better at empathizing. It just does so much good in the world.
Well, and if you're a parent,
yeah,
it gives you one more tool just to have. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about buyers, how do you help your buyers get ready for maybe a competitive situation? What kind of stuff do you like to do to get them to a good place?
Situation. Communication is the other skill that's so important in this business and in life too. And I just try and be as transparent as I can with all the information, and I try and ask as many questions as I can. If I can gather a bunch of information from the listing agent and say, hey, how many offers do you have on the table? That really, just that one question helps me frame in how much competition there is. And whatever the answer I get, whether it's 0 or 10, the first thing I'm going to do is talk to my sellers and say, hey, look, our offer is very much going to depend on the competition that's happening on this place, or the competition that I predict will happen before the time that they're going to review offers. Sometimes you don't get that information, or we don't have any yet, but the deadline is on Monday or Tuesday, 3 or 4 days from now. And you just have to do your best to figure out where the rest.
That's a long time to wait, and that happens frequently, and it's hard.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you have some power to work within that too. Why can't you call the day before and say, hey, how many offers do we have before the deadline? And that can help you frame it in. So just forwarding that communication and asking the right questions. The longer I'm in real estate, the more I realize that asking the right questions is important, and you get better at it as you go along too.
So how do your buyers weather like those many days of waiting, to find out if they win the bid?
Oh yeah. I'm a big fan of the short turnaround. I like to put a little bit of pressure on the sellers sometimes and just say, hey, look, we got 24 hours. We're looking at a lot of stuff. This isn't the only house we want to bid on. So, you can take it or leave it. You can make a counter offer, but we'd like to know sooner. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't, but definitely the hardest part emotionally in buying a house is that time it's a real nail biter, especially when you're a first time homeowner. You're like, am I going to have a house in a couple days, or am I still going to be searching? It's such a big thing that can affect your life event.
Oh, and it's so much work to be a buyer.
Yeah.
When, you know, and the first time people are always so shocked at how intrusive the financial
Yeah.
exploration is. And, you know, that 75-cent penny jar you just put in your account. Now we have to write a letter.
Yeah, right. I know.
Stuff
For so
like
many
that.
reasons, it's a nail biter. You know, you're dealing with a ton of people. There's so many people that work on a real estate transaction. You're talking to title companies and lenders and agents. And then I remember putting a bid in on my house here, and you know, it was this real Hail Mary for us. We lived in California. The fire burned the town down, so you couldn't, you know, Paradise was no longer an option. And the surrounding towns were either places we didn't really want to live, or there was little job opportunity, or everyone moved to the neighboring town.
I was just going to say, or there was,
day.
yep, they all
So
took it. Yeah.
It got blown out right away. And, you know, it was just really challenging place to be and figure out what we were going to do. So it was my spring break as a teacher. It was the only time I had off. I picked this place on the map, Grants Pass, seemed like it matched all these things on our criteria that sounded like it could be perfect. Half hour from a bigger town. It's not too big itself. It's a little more affordable than where we were at. You know, job opportunities were more abundant here. So we threw this Hail Mary. We drove. It was my wife and I and our at that point, probably 7-month-old son.
Oh,
we
wow.
did a 1,000-mile road trip in 2 or 3 days.
Oh,
where
wow.
we drove up to, I guess that big road trip was a little longer, but we did go to Bend, and we visited some friends there. They said, hey, look, we're moving across the country. Will you buy our entire house full of furniture? And we had nothing. You know, we literally had like the couple things you could fit in the car.
Right, because the fire, yeah.
So we were starting from scratch, and we said, please, you know, and they gave us a great deal. So we bought, you know, all their appliances and most of their furniture and all that, and put in a storage unit there. And then the next day we drove here to Grants Pass. We had an agent all lined up, and it was just this crazy Hail Mary where we looked at a bunch of places. I only had one shot to pull this off, and there was only one house that we wanted that we saw. So,
oh no,
the stakes were high. It's not like I could come back and keep looking. And, you know, somehow my wife also had a job interview the next day after we put an offer in, and she got it the day after that.
Wow.
And all the cards fell into place perfectly to enable us to pull it off. And it was a nail biter, and the stakes were high, and we landed that, and man, it felt good that we pulled it off.
And that wasn't that long ago. When did you have your purchase?
That was about 3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So it's still, and I think that is, again, a point of empathy that can be helpful to the clients that you're serving, because you remember what it was like. Totally.
Yeah. And there's a lot of emotions, and to just be present with people when they're having them and tell them that they're not wrong. It can be scary, and it's a nail biter, and, you know, it's hard to wait, and the anticipation is the hardest part.
Yeah. And the annoyance of the lender asking for that same piece of paper the 6th time.
I always tell them, hey, just so you know, just a heads up, you're going to be all checked off on paperwork and feel real good. And then, like, literally the day before closing, the lender's going to call you, or the underwriter, and they're gonna be like, cool, we need these 10 things today.
Again.
Yeah. Again.
Yeah. And at the end, it's really hard because people have like packed up their electronics and stuff. Totally. So I had the cutest older lady. You know what she did at the very end? She printed everything off, shut down all her stuff, and she put it in a tube sock. And she had every piece of paper she had ever given the lender, it wrapped up like in a scroll in the tube sock. And if they asked for something else, she pulled it out and went to Kinko's. Yeah. And that's kind of extreme, but and we make jokes about it, but that's kind of how it is at the end.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, how funny. So that house that you bought in Grants Pass, did you have multiple offers? Did you have to fight for it?
Yeah, and the interesting part about that is the sister of the person who sold the house to us walked by one day. She lives in the neighborhood, and she said, "Hey, I'm so glad you got this house." This was back when you could do love letters, they call them. And
right.
Said, you know, I remember they chose your offer specifically because of your story, and they want to help someone out from Paradise. So that was really
wow.
Yeah.
Well,
it was cool to get feedback on it too, because you don't always get that.
Well, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with a quick word from our sponsors. We're talking to Ryan Johnson of John L. Scott. Don't go away. Well, here we are again, folks, back at the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema, broker John L. Scott, with Ryan Johnson, also a broker with John L. Scott. And we want to say thank you again to our sponsors. We have John L. Scott of Ashland and Medford, Guy Giles Mutual Omaha Mortgage, and the local Rogue Valley Association Realtors. We really appreciate you making it possible for us to have this show every week. So Ryan, one of the things I wanted to circle back with you about is the short-term rental, because that is a huge market and there's a lot of people that want to get into it. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I have really strong feelings on both sides as far as short-term rentals go. I mentioned that I just bought a short-term rental, my first place, and I'm really excited about it. It's a big focus in my life, kind of a second job, for the last couple months, is getting this place and setting it up, and working with some partners who are old friends to just figure out the business and see what's going to work the best and try and do an A+ job on it. Our goal is to be in the top 10% in the area. So I've been working with other investors to help them pull off places that are cool. And I have an idea of trying to scale my business up in a way after a couple of years that it can, I can have a few more of those. And I really like the model for a couple of reasons, but I also feel like it's worth acknowledging that, there's a housing shortage. And when you're buying homes in a place that already has a bit of a housing crunch, this is something that can put pressure on it. So if you're going to be buying short-term rentals, I think it's really worthwhile to at least have an honest discussion about how it impacts local people, and finding markets has, less of an impact or can have more positive impacts.
That's an interesting philosophical conversation people have to have with themselves and their partners. And interestingly enough, the city of Medford is giving discounts on their system development fees and permits right now. I don't know if you're aware, but it's part of their way of giving back to the community while we have such a shortage, and also the fire situation. But they have a 10-year deed restriction that you will not Airbnb if you accept the discounted permits and the system development fees. And so not a lot of people know that, but it points again to the philosophy of the impact that short-term rentals have, possibly removing those units out of the, general tenant population.
I'm okay with that. In general, restrictions can affect investments in positive ways. And, it's kind of counterintuitive as an investor to say, hey, I want to buy in a market that is well regulated or has lots of restrictions. Most people would want to go the opposite direction. But in fact, especially with short-term rentals, if you can tap into a market that has some established rules, then you kind of know how to work within those rules. Or if you already own a place and they establish some rules that are reasonable, then it makes your place more valuable, because in some ways it's eliminating some competition. So,
well, and it's also less risky because it's been set up.
Exactly.
In some ways, it's less risky.
And that's the big thing is it does protect people who want to buy their first home, or tenants who need a place to rent. And I think that's important to keep in mind for development.
Yeah, that's an interesting twist on it, because it really is how you look at it long term. And I think that's what happened with the cannabis business. There was so many early adopters, and then the regulations came, and then the business exploded nationwide. And now here we are with all these farms, with tier 2 licenses, and they're having trouble selling them.
Totally.
Yeah. So you do rural property. Do you run into any of the cannabis farms, the people that are trying to get out of that cannabis business?
I'm really curious in the coming months and years here to see how that affects rural properties. I grew up, rurally, and so I feel pretty comfortable selling places with wells and septics, and I like being out in the woods and in the country. So I like selling those properties. It definitely can complicate things when there's cannabis business involved or nearby. So honestly, at this point, I kind of try and avoid it. Some people might specialize in that, and that's okay. But yeah, I think if we can free up some of those properties that don't just have hoop houses in every direction, I think that's going to mostly be a good thing. Less nitrogen in the water means less algae blooms and less people pumping out of wells. So
Yeah, the water usage for that crop, quote unquote,
yeah,
was huge.
yeah. So, those are real concerns. And, as far as having a sustainable economy and a sustainable aquifer, I think those are real concerns, and that puts a lot of pressure on those things. So yeah, I just tend to try and avoid those things, and it can be touchy.
Well, and now, the sheriff, Jackson County Sheriff, and I think Josephine County Sheriff may have also sent out letters to all the landowners warning them that if they were not on top of the regulations with their leases, if they had people on their land, that they could be held responsible directly. And it really came down to an interesting thing of the water, that they were illegally using water and electrical permits. It kind of came down to that. And it's like, well, does that mean there's going to be an opportunity now, if there's going to be a glut on the market with those kind of properties? As agents, should we maybe be looking into that as a possible opportunity for our clients to get a good deal on a piece of land, but that has all these problems? I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, like I said, I tend to try and avoid the cannabis properties or the former cannabis properties because
Just altogether.
yeah, it's a lot like dogs and dog owners. The other day we were trying to figure out, should we allow dogs? Should we not allow dogs in this short-term rental? It's this big debate we have going on with
Right.
And there's a great case we made that if you bring dogs, you're going to make more money, or in cannabis's case, you're going to have more tax money theoretically. And that's good in a lot of ways, and can bring people who have dogs like us. We both, myself and my partners, we own dogs and we like to bring them to our place. So we get that. And on the other hand, there's a lot of people out there who are bad dog owners, who aren't going to take care of a place as well as I would, who would not follow the rules, who would let their dog on the couch, who would let their dog chew something. And the same is true with people growing cannabis. There's a lot of people out there who are great and are eco-conscious and take care of the land, they're stewards for it. And there's a lot of people who are not. And a lot of times I encounter, what's left of a place when it's been abandoned.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
get trashed, and it's not cool. And no one's going to defend that, so that's always unfortunate when that happens. And I could say a lot more about that, but there's chemicals that can be left over. And so I just try and avoid it if I can, and give as much information when I can't avoid it.
Well, and there's plenty of other properties to choose from. I know a lot of people feel like there's a shortage, but in the upper price ranges, it's really more of a buyer's market. So if you're
hopefully
willing
there'll
to
be a lot more rural properties that were formerly cannabis properties that now, can't be monetized in that way. And so people have more opportunities for rural.
Maybe they'll go back to growing hay and pears and wine.
I'd love to see more pears. Yeah.
So well, Ryan, it's been a delight to get to interview you. Welcome to the John L. Scott family, even though you've been here, what, a year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, about a year and a half.
About a year and a half. Well, that's still, we call that new. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to reach out?
I have a pretty active Facebook page. I put messages on there. I'm trying to figure out Instagram and maybe TikTok coming up here, but
well, give us a phone number.
Yep. My phone number is 541-719-8624, and Ryan Johnson Realty @gmail is my email address.
That's his handle. Well, thank you again, Ryan. We'll definitely have to check in with you again and see how things are going. I'm Alice Lema, saying thank you. And this episode will be broadcast again tomorrow, Sunday at 6 p.m. Go and make it a beautiful Southern Oregon weekend. We'll see you next time. Bye now.
Thanks for having me.
That was killer.
Nice.
That was killer. Good job.